What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It is official. Sammy Watkins is a member of the Green Bay Packers. I know many of you have been trying to manifest a veteran wide receiver to Green Bay well before Davante Adams was even traded, much less after he was traded. And finally, a couple weeks before the draft, we get news that Sammy Watkins is officially a Green Bay Packer. Now, we have talked about Sammy Watkins right here on a couple different occasions. I mentioned him as a player that I thought made a ton of sense for Green Bay based on what they normally like. We'll get into all of that, but it was an interesting day because if you sort of rewind to Thursday morning, I woke up and I had a couple DMs and there was Reddit rumors and there was a bunch of smoke that Sammy Watkins was potentially going to be in Green Bay. And then there was a lot of nothing for a little bit. And then all of a sudden we got news that Sammy Watkins was in fact visiting Green Bay. And then after that, we got the tweet from Adam Schefter that said, yes, he is signing with Green Bay. And then the Packers confirmed it and Sammy Watkins was a member of the Green Bay Packers. So a little bit of a whirlwind day from crazy Reddit rumors to actually signing with the Packers. But I think those are sometimes the most fun days as we sort of go through those, mini dramas through the course of the day. Is he actually in Green Bay? Oh, he is in Green Bay. Is he going to sign? He's going to sign. He did sign. And you sort of go through that wave of emotions, but was a fun day in that regards. As far as the contract goes, we don't know the exact specifics yet. So the initial numbers are 1 year up to $4 million, which can mean just about anything. That could mean 1 year vet minimum with incentives that could get him up to $4 million. That could mean 1 year, $3.5 million totally guaranteed with maybe a couple incentives here and there. There could be void years on it, which makes it basically a vet minimum deal this year, but they'll pay more in the future. This could go in a variety of different directions. So until we get the exact details of that contract, it's going to be tough to overall evaluate exactly what it means and, whether or not he's a lock for the team based on the contract. If it's a 1 year vet minimum with incentives, but there's no guarantees in it, that means that he has to earn his job in camp. If it's closer to, $4 million guaranteed, he's on the roster, right? So we don't know the exact logistics of that yet, but of course we will cover it here as soon as we have that update. As far as, we'll get into all of what he does and doesn't bring to the table. Let's go through the statistics first. Last year he played only 457 total snaps, and it was even less towards the end of the year. Only 38 combined snaps in his last 3 games with the Ravens. Sort of fell out of favor and did not play that much. They went in a different direction with their wide receivers. Ended up catching 27 passes for 394 yards, 1 touchdown, a 14.6 yard average, and a 55.1% catch percentage. Now, if you look at the last 3 years, 2 years in Kansas City and 1 year in Baltimore, you can see the numbers starting to fall down a little bit, right? Maybe even more than that. 52 catches in 2019, 37 in 2020, 27 in 2021. He goes from 673 yards to 421 yards to 394 yards. He goes from 3 touchdowns to 2 touchdowns to 1 touchdown. So the production has slowly started to decline a little bit. Again, he's had some injury issues, which we'll get to more in just a moment. The catch percentage, again, was down. It was one of the lowest of his career last year at 55.1%. The plus side is his yards per reception was up for the first time since he was a Ram at 14.6 yards per catch. So he showed a little bit more playmaking, a little bit more of explosiveness when he did actually get the ball in his hands. But you can see this is not this silver bullet where he's going to come in and be the guy and take over. And you're like, you're getting top 5 pick Sammy Watkins, who everyone thought was going to be an absolute stud and tear through the league. That's not this guy. He's an average player whose play has been declining a little bit. The production's been declining. And again, we'll get into all of what he can and can't do more in just a moment. All of that said, and this is what I brought up last time I talked about Sammy Watkins on our, potential receiver episode. This does harken a little bit to a Devondre Campbell type signing. He's not going to break the bank. He fits all of their size, speed, measurable attributes that Green Bay loves. He can block on the outside. He's everything that Green Bay wants in a, if you took a picture of a Green Bay wide receiver, he's what they want. Size, speed, strength, blocking, athleticism. He's it, right? Same as Devondre Campbell a season ago at inside linebacker. You go back and you look at his tape with Arizona, you look at his tape with Atlanta, you see a guy that wasn't ultra productive. You saw the traits, you saw what he could do in flashes, but overall, from a consistency standpoint, from being the guy, just never showed it. He came into Green Bay with the right spot, with the right team, and everything clicked. He got to be the guy, and he ended up winning an All-Pro. Now, I don't think that's going to happen with Sammy Watkins, but this is that similar type of signing. They see the talent, they see the athleticism, the size, the profile, they see flashes of his production, and they're thinking, okay, as one of our outside wide receivers, again, not going to be an all-pro, but we think that we can unlock some of that potential, and he can be a real factor in the offense, and I totally get that. So this is a similar type of signing, as very similar to Christian Kirksey and some of the offensive linemen that they've brought in the last handful or last 3 seasons under Brian Gutekunst, like a Tramon Williams late in the process. Like, these are the type of signings, low risk, medium size reward, or in the case of Devondre Campbell, very high reward, right? But you're looking for players who can fit your scheme, fit your system, that fit the profile that you're looking for, that aren't going to break the bank, and Sammy Watkins fits that profile to a T. Now, he also has some connections with the team. Most importantly, he actually has a connection with Matt LaFleur. They were both together when Watkins was a member of the Rams. Matt LaFleur was offensive coordinator at that point. And during that season, Watkins had one of his most productive seasons. 8 touchdowns, 15.2 yards per catch, 10 plays of 20 plus yards. And this is all per Zach Kruse, who did a great job of putting this together, by the way. Jared Goff's passer rating when targeting Sammy Watkins during that season was 116.0. So we know that scheme fit can be ever so important, right? And it's possible, maybe not likely, but at least possible, that even though Andy Reid and the Baltimore Ravens offense with Lamar Jackson, even though those are very creative offenses, it's possible that he just didn't fit perfectly in those offenses, and that maybe that Rams style of offense that Matt LaFleur likes to copy a lot of concepts from, that style of offense fits him best and can unlock him the most. We're about to find out, as he's now a member of the Green Bay Packers, reunited with Matt LaFleur. He also has a connection with Jason Vrabel, wide receivers coach. Jason Vrabel actually just mentioned him the other day. He was a quality control coach in Buffalo when Sammy Watkins was there. So there's another connection. The coach that he's going to be specifically working with as his wide receivers coach, he has a connection with as well. So start to put the tea leaves together, and you can see how maybe this deal came to fruition. All right, so let's go over very specifically what Sammy Watkins is and what he isn't. I usually like to start with the positives, but let's start with what Sammy Watkins isn't. And this isn't necessarily a negative or positive, but I think a lot of people think back of like how long Sammy Watkins has been in the league and immediately think that he's just old. He's 28 years old. He's going to be 29 this season. And that's not that old. That's still well within your prime. It's now, if they sign him to a 5-year deal where it's going to be, bringing him into his, age 32, 33, 34 seasons, all right, we're having a very different conversation. But you get him on a 1 year when he's age 29, that's very much within your prime and very much still a very good age for what they're looking to do. So he is not old. Let's start with that. He is also not new to great quarterbacks and great offenses. Again, he's had the opportunity to play with Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, with the Andy Reid offense, with, again, a creative Baltimore Ravens offense last year, and it hasn't always worked for him. So I think sometimes there's this idea that a wide receiver is going to come to Green Bay and get to play with Aaron Rodgers, and that's just going to like take over and motivate that player. Well, I would have assumed that if that were the case, he probably would have been ultra motivated to play with MVPs like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson as well. Even if you say like, well, Lamar Jackson, maybe like, I still believe Lamar Jackson is an amazing quarterback, but at least Patrick Mahomes, right, in that Andy Reid offense. And there were flashes. Again, you go back to that Super Bowl run with Kansas City, and Sammy Watkins had some very impressive performances down the stretch of that game. But I don't think you can just assume like, oh, he's playing with Aaron Rodgers now. Rodgers is going to bring him to another level. He's played with great quarterbacks. He hasn't been able to get to that level. It would be semi-surprising if all of a sudden it was Rodgers and he just unlocked it. But again, crazier things have happened. I don't think Sammy Watkins is a replacement for MVS, and very clearly he is not a replacement for Devontae Adams. MVS was that pure speed guy in the outside. Sammy Watkins had a 4.440 coming out of college. He doesn't look like a 4.440 guy anymore. He has some speed to the outside. You still have to be aware of him, but he's not 4.340, 6'4" guy on the outside that you have to constantly be aware of. So for anyone that's just thinking, all right, they got their speed guy on the outside that can take the top off of defenses, that's not really what Sammy Watkins has been. He's been more of a traditional possession X type receiver in an offense, not just a speed demon down the field. So yes, he can add some verticality to the offense. He can get down the field from time to time. He can make some explosive plays, but this is not a direct, apples to apples replacement for MVS. And like I said, clearly this is not a Davante Adams replacement either. Now, there are some things that he can do from a possession standpoint. For example, if you remember this play that Green Bay's run last year, but I think the last couple years, Aaron Rodgers under center, he fakes the quick play action, snaps back, immediately gets his feet set, and throws to Davante Adams over the middle of the field. There are a couple plays on tape just last season where Sammy Watkins is running that exact route on that exact play, getting open over the middle, and I guarantee you that will be something that Rodgers and Watkins connect on this upcoming season. You see some of those similarities there. I guarantee you as well, if a team is playing off of Sammy Watkins, that Rodgers will hit him with some of those smoke screens. You see him win on slants. So there are some things that he can do semi-similarly, but this is not a route running god like Davante Adams. This is not a release god like Davante Adams. But if you remember, leading up to Kansas City, remember, he had that sick move on Richard Sherman, got open and created a huge play down the field for the Chiefs in that game. Well, he learned that from Davante Adams. Davante Adams did the same thing earlier in that postseason to Sherman. Watkins went out and emulated it, did the exact same thing, and got open deep down the field. So again, he's able to do some of the same things, but again, very clearly, this is not a pure Davante Adams replacement. So what is Sammy Watkins? Sammy Watkins is a piece of the puzzle. And I think we have to look at this more, holistically as a wide receiver group now. The last couple seasons, and rightfully so, this was Davante Adams catching 100 balls plus, and everyone else just kind of getting theirs where they could. Maybe a game or a drive would be an Allen Lazard game or an Allen Lazard drive. Maybe there'd be an MVS game or an MVS drive. Maybe there'd be some Randall Cobb moments. But ultimately, this was, we're going to throw the ball and spam the heck out of Davante Adams, and everything else will sort of get there when we get to it, if we get to it. And Robert Tunyon's a piece of that. The running backs are a piece of that. This is going to be different. And I don't care who they draft, unless they trade for a ridiculous high-end wide receiver, which I do not see happening. Unless that happens, unless they get a Metcalf or a Lockett or something like that. And even if they get like a Tyler, even if they get one of those guys, I still don't think it's going to be a spamming to just that one receiver. I still think it's going to be somebody who plays very much within the functionality of the offense. I don't think this is going to be a repeat. For better, within the scheme of the offense. For worse, you don't have Davante Adams, but it's just going to be different. But ultimately, what I believe Sammy Watkins is a piece of the puzzle. He is a piece of this wide receiver core. And again, regardless of who they draft, I guarantee at some point they're going to get a speed guy. They're probably going to get another overall type wide receiver. You've got a possession guy in Sammy Watkins, more of a possession guy in Lazard, a slot guy in Cobb, maybe a gadget guy in Amari Rodgers. You're going to have different pieces on this offense. And Sammy Watkins is simply one of those pieces. You're not going to have, Cooper Kupp and Odell Beckham. You're not going to have Davante Adams or, go back years. You're not going to have Greg Jennings and Jordy Nelson. These are going to be some receivers who are developing, some receivers who are pieces of the puzzle, but you're not going to have superstars. So this offense is going to have to function as a whole. I do believe also that what you are getting with Sammy Watkins is a true outside wide receiver. And we've talked about that in our draft breakdowns, right? Green Bay doesn't need a slot guy. Amari Rodgers is a slot guy. Randall Cobb is a slot guy. Allen Lazard plays 40% of his snaps in the slot. They don't need any more guys to play the slot. It's not to say that Watkins couldn't line up in the slot or that if they get another receiver that they couldn't line up in the slot from time to time, but you can't bring in just a primary slot receiver because it doesn't solve any of your problems. You still have needs on the outside. Sammy Watkins is a true outside wide receiver. That's what he's played the majority of his career. That's where he wins, and that's exactly what Green Bay needed. He also, as mentioned earlier, fits Green Bay's profile very, very well. He had an 84% percentile RAS score coming out of college. I don't think he's that same level of athlete at age 28, 29, but he's still a good athlete. Size, speed, strength. He can, again, win in a variety of different ways. He's a good blocker. He fits exactly what Green Bay wants as an outside wide receiver. And again, that's why you were able to telegraph Sammy Watkins as a potential target for Green Bay so easily, just because he checked so many boxes. Again, the blocking on the outside is something that's very important. I've talked about it over and over and over again, and why I don't necessarily believe that guys like Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and some of those guys are probably high up enough on Green Bay's draft board that they're going to spend premium draft picks on it. Could very well be wrong. And Jameson Williams, same thing. And they could attack one of those positions. Remember, Devontae wasn't a great blocker either. So you could go a Jameson Williams on the outside with Sammy Watkins on the other outside and Allen Lazard playing primarily in the slot. Mercedes Lewis at tight end, A.J. Dillon in the backfield. Guess what? In that situation, the only guy that's a poor blocker is your Jameson Williams or your Chris Olave. So if you have one of those guys, you're okay. But if all of a sudden you started getting out with a Chris Olave and Randall Cobb in the slot and then another, lesser blocking wide receiver, like you just aren't able to exactly run the offense the way that Matt LaFleur wants. So his size and his blocking ability, he's been one of the better blocking wide receivers in the NFL for years now. I expect that to continue or maybe even get better with what Matt LaFleur demands out of his wide receivers in this offense. He's a great scheme fit. Again, we just talked about the blocking. We talked about him being an outside wide receiver. The size, the speed. He also is able to win on some of those crossing routes. He's able to be schemed open. He can run after the catch a little bit. I think he fits very well with what Matt LaFleur wants to do. I think Aaron Rodgers will take to him. I think this is a good fit overall. And again, we saw him work very well with the Rams, with Matt LaFleur when he was there. I expect that to carry over as he starts learning this offense and playing in Green Bay. He's also a veteran, and that's important. No matter what happened, I never expected Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers just to go out and add rookies and say, all right, get after it. That's just not, who ultimately Aaron Rodgers is and who he's successful with, especially right away. It just takes so much time. I think he'll be able to develop a rapport with Sammy Watkins. He now has guys in Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, and Sammy Watkins that he trusts, and I think he's going to trust Sammy Watkins. I don't think that relationship is going to take long to develop. And I think that he will appreciate having three veterans. Now, I expect that to be supplemented by a couple rookies and Amari Rodgers, guys that he probably doesn't trust right away, that he's going to have to develop that rapport with. But I think overall, this gives him a better group of wide receivers from a veteran standpoint that he feels a bit more comfortability with as he starts going into the season, especially early in the year, as again, you can expect a couple rookies and Amari Rodgers probably to take up those remaining spots as well. Unfortunately, he is also very injury prone. All right, he hasn't played 16 games since 2014, and he's only played in 9 games total, 9 games per season in 3 of the last 4 seasons. So that's just who he is. He doesn't play many 16-game seasons. In fact, again, only one, or especially now 17-game seasons. So you can expect Sammy Watkins probably to miss some time. You could argue that he's due for a 16 to 17-game season, and that'd be great, but it has been an issue more often than not through the course of his career. Again, we talked about it earlier. He's run some very similar routes and concepts to what Green Bay wants him to do. He's at his best season under Matt LaFleur. And the last thing that he is a very, 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 very unique individual. Check out Ty Dunn's piece from a couple years ago over on Bleacher Report. He believes some very interesting things, and it's definitely worth your time to read that article. So a very interesting player that will add a different degree of interesting to that wide receiver room. And I'm sure him and Aaron Rodgers are going to have some very unique conversations that I would love to be a fly on the wall for, just to, just be very entertaining. No, nothing more than that. All right. So what I think he's going to bring to the table here, again, I don't think you should have super high expectations for this move. I think it's a good signing. I like this signing. As I tweeted out, I give it about a B+ overall. But he's had some chances before with good offenses and great quarterbacks, and he hasn't put up huge numbers. But if you don't expect too much and you expect him to be a piece of the puzzle, a guy who can block on the outside, maybe make a big catch here or there. He had 2 clutch plays last season that helped them win football games. He can be that sort of guy, and he can add to your offense. The tape overall is meh. It's not bad. It's not great. It's meh. But if you're not expecting too much, if you have realistic expectations, I do think he can be a player that helps you win football games. Now, he's lacking in suddenness or special traits at this point in his career. He's not going to make a ton of playmaking, highlight level plays. He'll make a flash play or a splash play here or there, but that's the exception to the rule. But he's a run blocker who fits the offense well and can make a couple plays. And again, if you're not expecting too much, I think he can help this team win. And again, you never know. Right scheme fit, right player, right time, where you might stumble upon something a little bit more. And guess what? Brian Gutekunst and that scouting staff deserve a little bit of the benefit of the doubt for adding that type of player after they've added guys like Rasul Douglas and Devondre Campbell over recent seasons that have turned out really, really well. And again, I do think Aaron Rodgers will develop trust with him, but also not over-target him. So again, I like the signing as a piece of the offense. Now, a couple periphery things here. I do think as we start looking into this, again, regardless of who the Packers end up ultimately selecting in the draft, I think we are going to see a much more real version of this Matt LaFleur offense. Again, I don't think that you were going to see one wide receiver just generate all of the targets or a tight end. I think we're going to see a much more balanced approach, a lot more power running and zone stretch, obviously. I think we're going to see a lot of play action, a lot of bootlegs, a lot of ingenuity and creativity from Matt LaFleur and Adam Stenavich, Aaron Rodgers, etc. And I think you will see this offense be a real version of itself and not a little bit, I don't even know the right word for it, but just, bipolar or like dual, if you will, right? Like you've still seen versions of Aaron Rodgers doing his own thing within a Matt LaFleur offense, and it just seems, helter-skelter at times. I think we're going to see a much more holistic Matt LaFleur offense, and frankly, I'm very excited for that. That's not to mean that Aaron Rodgers isn't going to have Aaron Rodgers magic. It's not to mean that he's not going to make checks at the line of scrimmage and do his thing. By all means, you want to take advantage of that stuff. That's an advantage to your offense. But I do think this offense will likely run a bit more holistically with not as much of a focus and a target on one specific player. And again, that's not to bash that. That's what I would have done too if I had Davante Adams. But I do think we will see a more well-rounded offense. Whether that results in more point production remains to be seen. I think, in fact, I would bet at this point probably not. But I am interested to see, and I'm excited to see how this works. I have seen people that have said, like, hey, this more reeks of like another Devin Funchess move where you bring him in and see what he has in camp, and if he doesn't have anything, you release him. We'll see what the contract says. I don't think that's the case. I do think Sammy Watkins is going to make this team. I think Devin Funchess would have made the team his first year had he not sat out via COVID and then come back and everything like that. But I do think Sammy Watkins will make the team, and I do think they expect him to be a, maybe not core player, but a piece of this offense, both now and into the remainder of this season. I've also had questions of whether or not Green Bay should bring Devin Funchess back that I'm very confused by. He got cut before the end of the season, like before final cutdowns. He had the snafu with the media, and then he didn't sign with anyone and sat out now basically, 3+ years? Because he had the injury year, the COVID year, all of last year. So yeah, 3+ years. No, Devin Funchess is not coming back. The other questions I saw on social media was, does this change Green Bay's draft plans? No, not at all. I always expected there to be 2 or 3 draft picks and at least one veteran signing. To me, this is the veteran signing. They're still going to go out and attack this position via the draft. Now, that doesn't mean 2 firsts or a first and a second. I still think this could be a second round and a 4th round, something like that. Don't panic if that's it. I think that very well could be where Green Bay leans based on where the talent is in this draft. But I do think they are still going to attack this position via the draft and add more talent to a wide receiver group that still needs it. You're not basing anything on your draft based on a 1-year low money contract for Sammy Watkins. So this does not change any of their draft plans at all. Does it change their free agency plans or their want to go out and get a veteran wide receiver? Maybe, probably, right? Like, I still think if the right receiver presented itself in a trade, that Brian Gutekunst wouldn't maybe shy away from that, but probably not looking for too much more. They could add another veteran wide receiver, especially if maybe the draft doesn't fall the way that they want. But I think ultimately this is their veteran. They now have Sammy Watkins, Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, and Amari Rodgers. That leaves 2 to 3 spots. You got to think another one of those spots may be dedicated for a special teams guy, whether that's a Malik Taylor or a Juwan Winfrey. I think you add in a couple draft picks, and I think that's probably your ceiling for wide receiver. I don't think there's that much room. If they could get maybe another prove-it guy in a real vet minimum deal, absolutely that's within the realm of possibility, but don't expect them to go out and get a Jarvis Landry, a Julio Jones, a Will Fuller, anything like that. Last but not least, when the Devontae Parker trade was made, I mentioned at the time, it's an interesting trade. I wouldn't have done it because I didn't want to give up the 3rd round pick. And I said at the time, I think you could probably get Sammy Watkins for a lower deal than what Devontae Parker was under from a contract standpoint and not have to give the 3rd round pick. And if it's me, I'd rather have Sammy Watkins in a 3rd round pick than Devontae Parker in a 5th round pick. So if you look at the numbers, 2021, Devontae Parker played in 10 games with 40 catches, 515 yards, 12.9 yards per catch, and 2 touchdowns. Sammy Watkins, 13 games, 27 catches, 394 yards, 14.6 yards per catch, and 1 touchdown. Parker better, but not like exponentially so. You might say, well, yeah, but Parker has more upside and, is, more potential. Well, Parker's 29. Watkins is 28. Parker's actually the older wide receiver. Parker's set to make $6 million this season. Watkins will make less than $4 million, so Watkins makes less. And again, you didn't have to give up a 3rd round pick to get him. So while I think Devontae Parker is the better receiver of the two, nowhere near enough to pay at least $2 more million, probably closer to $3 more million than that, and from a salary cap standpoint, and give up a 3rd round pick. Yes, they got a 5th round pick back, but giving up a 3rd round pick is a top 100 premium pick. I just think, while Parker's the better player, I think Green Bay got the better end of those two possibilities. Last but not least, I said that already, but I'll say it again, Sammy Watkins will wear number 11 for the Green Bay Packers this upcoming season. That's going to do it for me and my breakdown of Sammy Watkins. Hope you enjoyed it. I will be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.